roll credits, where movie lovers get the trivia they didn't know they needed, made with a little help from AI, so double check your facts. Today we're diving into Beef Season 2. Did you know this season resets the story with a completely new conflict? And before we get into it, drop a comment with what we should cover next, old or new.
Yeah, please do. We love seeing those suggestions.
Definitely. So to set the stage for our mission today, we have this massive stack of sources. I mean, we're talking interviews with the new cast, dispatches from the production team, and some honestly incredibly revealing notes from the creator himself.
Oh, yeah, the notes are fascinating.
Right. And we are basically looking at how a show that won, 8 Emmy Awards?
8, yeah. Unbelievable run.
Yeah, 8 Emmys for this adrenaline-fueled story about literal road rage, and they just managed to throw its own winning formula entirely out the window. We are digging into how it pivots into this completely new anthology-style narrative. And this time it's focused on the elite, the passive-aggressive, and the just unhinged capitalism of a country club.
Which is, I mean, it's a massive creative risk. Because just to set a baseline context for you, the listener, the original stars that you know and love, Ali Wong and Steven Yeun, they are absolutely still involved.
Right, but not on screen.
Exactly. They stepped behind the camera to serve as executive producers this time around. And the creator, Lee Sung-jin, he made this very deliberate choice. He describes this new season not as a direct continuation, but as a, quote, spiritual sibling to the first.
A spiritual sibling. I like that.
Yeah, if you think about it, season 1 was fundamentally about these isolated people finding someone to live alongside, right?
Yeah.
Even if that connection was forged through like absolute mutual destruction.
Oh, totally. It was chaos.
Complete chaos. But season 2 takes the next logical and frankly terrifying step. It asks the question, once you actually find that person and you build a life with them, how do you survive the crushing weight of modern society together without imploding?
Wow, that is such a heavier premise.
It really is.
And to figure out how we got here, we kind of have to look at the literal spark that ignited this new season in the real world. Because in season 1, Lee Sung-jin was inspired by a real road rage incident he experienced.
Right, the infamous white SUV.
Exactly. But this time around, he didn't even have to leave his house. He just had to, open his window.
Yeah, so he was literally just at home in his neighborhood, and he overhears this massive, screaming argument coming from a couple living nearby.
Just casually echoing through the street.
Yeah. And, I mean, hearing your neighbors fight isn't exactly groundbreaking inspiration on its own, people argue. But Lee didn't focus on the argument itself. He focused on the audience.
The people watching.
Exactly. When he told people about the screaming match later, he noticed this stark, almost absurd generational divide in how they reacted to his story. Like, his Gen Z peers were absolutely horrified.
Oh, I can imagine.
They were literally clutching their pearls, asking him if he called 911, just deeply concerned that a serious crime was taking place right next door.
Meanwhile, the millennials and the Gen Xers he talked to had a completely different reaction.
Oh, completely.
They basically just shrugged. They viewed it as standard domestic background noise. Their response was essentially, just turn up the TV, let them fight it out.
Yeah, just ignore it. And that juxtaposition, that is the seed for the entire second season.
Really? Just that reaction?
Yeah, that completely different threshold for witnessing and processing conflict. Because some people view a screaming match as a life or death emergency, right? And others view it as just another Tuesday.
Yeah.
So Lee took that dynamic and dropped it straight into the new on-screen conflict.
Right. He literally built the new ensemble around that observation. Because you have this young Gen Z working class couple, Ashley, who's played by Kaylee Spaney in Austin, played by Charles Melton.
And they work at this hyper-elite country club.
Right. And one day, they are just going about their jobs, folding towels or whatever, and they accidentally stumble upon a vicious, violent fight between their millennial boss, Josh, played by Oscar Isaac, and his wife, Lindsay, played by Carey Mulligan.
Which is such a powerhouse cast, by the way.
Insane cast. But the whole vibe of the aggression has changed. Season 1 was so overt, people flipping each other off on the highway, chasing each other through the suburbs.
Yeah, throwing things.
Exactly.
Right.
But this season is entirely about passive-aggressive workplace repression.
Yeah, and that repression is key.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because in the first season, the rage was out in the open on the street. It was chaotic, sure, but it was incredibly honest. Now we're in a country club. Everyone is wearing crisp polos, smiling through their teeth, pretending to be perfectly polite.
Right, the facade.
Yeah, the facade. So I have to admit, I'm a little skeptical. Does stuffing the rage behind a polished, wealthy facade actually make the eventual explosion more dangerous for these characters? Or does it just kind of slow down the pacing of the show?
Well, I'd actually push back on the idea that it slows things down.
Okay, how so?
It actually creates a pressure cooker that makes the stakes infinitely more dangerous. Because when you repress rage to maintain a polite, wealthy facade, that anger doesn't just, dissipate into the ether. It ferments.
Oh, that's a good word for it. Ferments.
It does. It turns sour, and it mutates into psychological warfare and manipulation and blackmail. Lee pointed out that in a country club setting, you inherently have boomer and silent generation members being served by millennial and Gen Z workers.
Right, so there's a huge class and age divide built right in.
Exactly. And those workers have to constantly present absolute positivity and total submission, all while navigating a psychological horror show behind the scenes. So when the explosion finally happens, it's not just a loud argument on a highway, it's a tactical, systemic dismantling of someone else's life.
Wow. And that makes the opening fight between Josh and Lindsay so much more critical. Because that fight is the inciting incident that shatters the polite facade for the whole season.
It really is the anchor of the season.
And looking at the production notes, Carey Mulligan and Oscar Isaac didn't just show up on set and wing a screaming match. They treated this scene like a highly complex mathematical equation.
Yeah, they actually referred to it as a, quote, big old puzzle that took them months to solve.
Months, just for one argument scene.
Months. They blocked the entire scene meticulously. They were literally taping out the floor of the set like they were rehearsing a live stage play.
That's incredible dedication.
Well, they recognized that because this single argument sets the entire plot into motion, every single pause, every breath, and every venomous glance had to feel fundamentally truthful to a failing marriage. Like, if the audience doesn't believe this fight, the rest of the season just collapses.
It falls apart, yeah. And the dialogue they ended up with is just brutal. There's this one devastating line in the middle of the fight where Lindsay just gasps, "You've wasted my whole life."
Oof, that line hits so hard.
It really does. And you know what the craziest part is? Lee Seung-jin wrote that line on the actual day of shooting.
Wait, really? It wasn't in the script?
Nope. It wasn't even in the original script. Carey Mulligan had some incredible insight into why that line destroyed her character, though. She described Lindsay as a woman driven by a sheer, blinding panic over evaporated time.
That makes perfect sense for her.
Yeah. Lindsay has critically low self-esteem. She has no real career to speak of, and she is suddenly realizing her marriage is a total sham. That panic over lost time is what turns into her incredibly manipulative behavior later on.
Actually, that explains a really funny piece of advice Mulligan gave in an interview recently.
Oh, what did she say?
Well, someone asked what advice she would give her own miserable character, and she just said, put down the phone, stop living your entire life online, and go buy a dumb phone.
A dumb phone? I love that.
Yeah, she saw Lindsay as someone completely paralyzed by the illusion of connection.
That is a brilliant character assessment. And to capture that specific paralysis and emotional chaos during the fight scene, the production pulled off this technical feat that is, frankly, mind-boggling.
Oh, the music thing.
Yes, because most television shows score their scenes in post-production. The actors perform in silence, and the music is added months later to match their emotions. But Lee decided to invert that entirely.
Yeah, and this is wild.
Here's where it gets really interesting, folks. Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan wore hidden earwigs during the filming of that massive fight scene.
Like hidden inside their ear.
Yes, hidden in their ears. They were listening live to musical cues composed by Phineas O'Connell, Billie Eilish's longtime collaborator, who did the original score for the season.
That is so unique for TV production.
It is. And Phineas didn't just write a track. He scored that specific scene roughly 100 different times.
100 times.
Yes, and the actors were literally adjusting their performance to his soundtrack in real time. But here's the kicker. Lee Seung-jin then had to spend an absolute fortune in post-production having the visual effects team digitally paint those earwigs out of their ears.
Oh my gosh, that must have cost so much money. But, think about the immense technical and emotional trust that requires between the actors, the composer, and the director.
Totally.
And to ground that technical challenge, Isaac and Mulligan tapped into their own real-world history, because they have been close friends for 15 years.
Right, ever since they shot the movie Drive together back in 2011.
Exactly. So they actually used the timeline of their own real-life friendship to map out the timeline of Josh and Lindsay's failing marriage. They used their actual genuine affection to create a deep, believable bedrock of shared history just so they could tear it all down on camera.
I just can't get over the incredible irony of that setup.
What do you mean?
Like, as actors, they are literally plugged in to the emotion via earpieces, fully synchronized to the live music and to each other's 15-year history. But the characters they are playing, they are completely disconnected.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They're standing in the same room, but they're completely incapable of hearing each other.
That is perfect. They're experiencing perfect harmony as artists to portray perfect dissonance as characters.
Exactly.
And that dissonance has a massive blast radius, because the fallout from this fight doesn't just destroy their marriage. The younger couple, Ashley and Austin, witnessed the whole thing, right? And that creates a ripple effect of blackmail.
Right, they see an opportunity.
Yeah, they use the secrets they overheard to try and climb a ruthless social ladder within the club.
Which introduces the heavy, suffocating squeeze of capitalism that hangs over the entire season. Charles Melton's character, Austin, has this line that feels like the thesis statement for an entire generation.
Oh, the bag line.
Yes. He says, everyone grabbed the bag before we could.
It really is the thesis statement.
Yeah.
Lee Sung-jin has been very explicit in interviews that you simply cannot write a story set in 2026 without writing about unhinged capitalism.
It's just the reality we live in.
Yeah. Austin and Ashley are looking up at the millennial and boomer generations above them, and they're realizing that the system is fundamentally broken. The middle class is being crushed into dust.
Right, they're working so hard for nothing.
Exactly. They know that no matter how hard they work, folding towels at that country club, they will never, ever be allowed to become members. The bag they were promised if they just worked hard, it's gone. It's been hoarded.
So, if the bag is gone, you naturally have to look at the people who are hoarding the wealth. And that brings us to the ultimate power in this country club, the chaebols.
Oh, this is such a fascinating addition. For the listener, if you're not familiar with the term, a chaebol isn't just a rich person. It's a massive, family-controlled industrial conglomerate in South Korea.
Right, we're talking unfathomable wealth.
Yeah, think of the families behind empires like Samsung or Hyundai. Their wealth and influence operate on a scale that is almost incomprehensible.
And in the show, this power is represented by the billionaire Korean owner of the club, Chairwoman Park. She's played by the legendary Oscar winner Yoon Yo-jong. And her second husband is Dr. Kim, played by Song Kang-ho.
Who everyone will absolutely recognize as the patriarch from the movie Parasite.
Yes. And, you know, the casting story behind Song Kang-ho is so entertaining.
Did he pass on it at first?
He did. He initially rejected the role. He read the script and wasn't sure the character really fit him. But Yoon Yoo-jung, who is practically acting royalty in Korea, she actually called him up and gave him a piece of her mind.
Oh, I love that. What did she say?
She essentially told him, you're the greatest actor alive. You have to do this show.
And you just don't say no to her.
Exactly. You do not say no to Yoon Yoo-jung, so it worked. He signed on.
It really speaks to the gravity and respect she commands in the industry. But bringing in these massive Korean stars isn't just stunt casting, you know? It acts as a crucial thematic bridge between East and West.
How so?
Well, take Charles Melton's character, Austin, for example. Austin is a mixed-race former athlete. Melton himself is half Korean and half white, and he brings a lot of his own lived experience into this role.
Okay, that makes sense.
So throughout the season, Austin is navigating what it means to be Korean-American when he is suddenly brought into close proximity with ultra-wealthy native Koreans.
Oh, that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and he slowly realizes that the deep conviction he had in his own cultural identity is actually just a mask. It's a mask he wears to try and endear himself to the upper echelons of this society, just hoping they'll throw him a bone.
And what's wild is that the inspiration for this specific storyline is straight out of the creator's real life.
Oh, the strike story, right?
Yeah. During the Hollywood writers' strike, Lee Sung-jin couldn't work on television scripts, obviously. So he traveled to Korea to direct a music video for RM, the frontman of BTS.
Which is a huge gig on its own.
Right. And while he was over there riding the incredible high of Beef Season 1 success, he was literally wined and dined by actual real-life K-ball CEOs.
Wow.
He got a first-hand glimpse into this ultra-elite, insulated echelon of Korean society. He even got to shoot his project at the ultra-exclusive Emmer Pacific building in Seoul.
How did he manage that? That place is locked down.
Because a real-life chairwoman, Mickey Lee, was a fan of Beef and just waived the massive location fee for him as a favor.
Just as a favor. That is incredible.
Yeah. He even had Parasite director Bong Joon-ho visit his set, literally elbow him at the director's monitor, and jokingly criticize his camera framing.
That is the ultimate flex right there.
It really is. But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay, go for it.
Why does throwing ultra-wealthy Korean billionaires into a story about a miserable middle-class American marriage actually work? Like, does it make the social commentary hit harder for you, the viewer, or does it just distract from the core domestic drama?
I don't think it distracts at all, honestly. I think it completely recontextualizes the stakes.
In what way?
It's all about scale and perspective, because when a show only looks at the middle class, the struggles seem entirely personal. It's a failing marriage, a tough boss, a bad day.
Right, it feels contained.
But when you introduce the billionaire class, the K-balls, it exposes the architecture of the system itself. It shows the audience that Josh and Lindsay's desperate clinging to their country club status and Austin and Ashley's desperate attempts to blackmail their way up the ladder, they're all just symptoms of a rigged game.
Oh, wow, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
The cabals represent a level of wealth and power that is so totally insulated, it makes the brutal, clawing infighting of the lower classes look both tragic and kind of absurd. It highlights how unhinged capitalism pits the working and middle classes against each other in a literal fight to the death, while the true elite just, watch from the balcony.
Watch from the balcony. That is a brilliant way to look at it. But tackling such heavy, depressing themes of class warfare and identity loss, that requires a highly specific visual and tonal balance.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you aren't careful, the show just becomes this miserable slog of a tragedy.
And that was Lee Sung-jin's biggest fear, actually. To elevate the visual motifs and ensure the pacing felt cinematic rather than purely depressing, they brought in acclaimed cinematographer James Laxton.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Yeah, and his specific job was to make this world look as alluring, polished, and deceptive as the wealth it was portraying. He needed to make the gilded cage look beautiful.
And the creative ambition behind the scenes was sky high. Lee Sung-jin actually told his crew that he wanted season 2 to be like Radiohead's second album, The Bends.
That's quite a comparison.
Right. Because when you have a massive acclaimed debut, whether it's Pablo Honey or Beef Season 1, everyone is just waiting with bated breath to see if you'll fall flat on your face.
The sophomore slump.
Exactly. And his goal wasn't just to repeat the hits. He wanted to take the core elements that people loved and mature them into something even better. Something that proved the first time wasn't just a fluke.
But to survive the pressure of that ambition, and honestly,
Yeah.
to survive the sheer heaviness of the scripts they were shooting, the cast had to lean incredibly hard into dark humor on set.
Yeah, the behind-the-scenes dynamics sound like a comedy of their own. Like, Carey Mulligan apparently got into character before scenes by blasting the song Little Girls from the musical Annie.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, she literally saw her character, Lindsay, as a Miss Hannigan type. Just this miserable, awful woman who resents everyone around her, which she found incredibly fun to play.
I can totally see that energy on screen.
And leaning into the generational warfare theme of the show, Mulligan and Isaac jokingly referred to Milton and Spaney simply as the kids whenever they wrapped a difficult scene.
Just fully embodying the boomer-millennial dynamic. But the contrast between the heavy material and the reality of filming is perfectly captured by the story about the dog.
Oh, yes. This is my absolute favorite anecdote from the entire production.
It's so good.
So, Carey Mulligan and Oscar Isaac were shooting this incredibly tense, emotional scene, and Lee Sung-jin, sitting behind the director's monitor, was dead silent.
And if you know anything about acting, silence from the director usually means you are bombing.
Exactly. It means you were doing a terrible job. So Mulligan and Isaac spent the entire day absolutely terrified, second-guessing every choice, wondering if they were completely missing the required comedic tone.
They were having a full-blown crisis of confidence.
Only to eventually realize that Lee wasn't ignoring them because they were bad. He was just completely obsessed with Burberry, the dachshund who was making his on-screen acting debut in the scene.
Wait, a real dog?
Yes! The dog's real name is Jones, and Lee was just sitting back in his chair, heaping quiet praise on the dog. He was just whispering, "Jonesy's a good boy. Jonesy, that was perfect," completely forgetting to validate two of the most acclaimed actors of their generation.
That is just incredible. Prioritizing the dog over Oscar Isaac.
Absolutely.
Oh.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the brilliant, deceptive cinematography, the intense live-scored arguments, and the pitch-black humor, It feels like the production kept the actual DNA of the show perfectly intact, even while changing the setting.
Yeah, they really did.
It's like watching a beautifully manicured golf course slowly catch on fire. And instead of trying to put it out, everyone just stands around using the flames to light their expensive cigars because they're too proud to admit they're burning.
That is the perfect encapsulation of what this season achieves. The characters aren't trying to fix the broken system. They are trying to exploit the chaos for their own gain.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I mean, the first season was a literal physical collision between two people who felt they had nothing left to lose. But this new season is a slow-motion psychological car crash between people who are terrified of losing the tiny bit of status they have, all while being manipulated by billionaires who have everything.
So layered.
It's a masterclass in survival within an unhinged capitalist system, and it's all wrapped tightly in a passive-aggressive smile. But, despite all that darkness on screen, the reality of making it was deeply unifying.
Oh, really?
Yeah. After they called cut on the very final shot of the season, the 5 core cast members and the director literally stood in a circle in the middle of the street and just sobbed together. The material was brutal, but the act of creating it was profoundly full of love.
Wow. That is beautiful. Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with, the listener.
Always good to end on a deep thought.
Since this entire massive, sprawling season of television was sparked by the creator simply overhearing his neighbors having a petty argument, I want you to look at your own life for a second.
Put yourself in his shoes.
Yeah, if you heard a screaming match next door tonight, who are you in that scenario? Are you the Gen Z pearl clutcher dialing 911, deeply concerned for everyone's well-being and believing the worst? Or are you the millennial, deadened by the constant chaos of the world, just turning up the TV volume and ignoring it?
It's a real question of how emotionally disconnected we've become.
It really is, even when we are totally plugged into everything happening around us. And that wraps our deep dive into Beef Season 2. If you enjoyed unpacking this new chapter, follow Roll Credits and share it with your fellow fans. And don't forget to drop a comment with what movie or show we should cover next, old or new. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more movie magic, and maybe a few more wild conflicts.